Time is now 6 o'clock, and I call to order this January 31st, 2024 Council Workshop meeting. Please rise with me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, first is an opportunity for citizens to be heard. So if there's anybody here who would like to provide public comment on any issue of borough government, you can head to the podium. Go ahead, Mr. Smith. We'll need your name and address for the minutes.
Hello, Don Ritchie Smith, 350 H Street, Carlisle, Pennsylvania. Most people know me as Buck, B-U-C-K. In school, I went by the name of Richie. I had one teacher who thought it was Richard, so he called me Dick. You can call me anything you want. Thank you for your time and your service. It is difficult to show up and do these things. It is important. I no longer work, and it's hard for me to come here and stand up and speak, organize a thought, try and present myself. I'm still not ready. I'm never ready. I'm always behind. I have a lot of complaints. I've been here before. My life is not getting better. It has gotten more difficult. Tonight on the way here, I was called an asshole in a crosswalk, crossing High Street, West and High, because I used the walk sign. When people had a green light, they wanted to turn left, they wanted to turn right, they wanted to go every which way. The government says I should go, I'm going. You set it up for us. That made me mad. I don't like to be disrespectful to people. I'm a nice guy. I don't like to be angry. I'd rather be happy. January 3rd, I had enough energy to leave my apartment. I spent a lot of time looking out windows. Always have all my life. A dream. Walking in town, I'm at Hanover, North Hanover and North Street. Divides there, east-north. I'm talking to the former owner of Sunnyside Restaurant. Hadn't seen each other in years. We recognize one another. While we are speaking, boom. Lady's laying in the street. She was walking the crosswalk. She had the light, she says. What had happened was traffic was backed up on the main street because it's just one lane. You know, we don't have all those lanes like we used to do. So all the traffic's big, long line. Trucker he didn't want to impede the intersection. So he stopped in front of the real estate building there. He waved the woman across. There was a driver who wanted to turn left. So the driver turns left, doesn't see the lady who has the walk sign. Nobody wanted this accident. It's the traffic that is setting up these collisions. The traffic patterns are all wrong. You have people crossing the walk when the lights are green. People are trying to turn. We have to get around this town. It's not just a sightseeing town. This is a hub. All the roads coming here are widening. Traffic is increasing. We're narrowing our streets. They just put in this plan. You have this curbing going way out into our intersections. You know, you have reflectors. You have people going right out into the cartway almost, and everybody's deciding who has the right of way. You have bicyclists competing with tractor trailers and cars. You have go-karts in town. We all have to get around. But this stuff of bringing everything together, it is not working. So I don't like being called bad names. I didn't like to interrupt the traffic. I was just trying to prove a point. I'm sorry. When I get up to the next intersection, there's just a stop sign. There were 6 or 8 cars lined up. I let them all pass. I sat back at the corner of the building, waited until they all passed, and I crossed the crosswalk. I can wait. So, you know, I think it's wrong. You know, we get a walk signal, traffic should be stopped, period. And this one lane, this road diet, we gave it a try, but it's not working. And, I never remember College and B Street being a bad intersection. I'm not against roundabouts. But then you went and you clamped B Street shut. What is up with that? That was a perfectly wide street. And you get down there now, it's all this wiggle waggle and, oh, well, I can't turn because somebody else is there. It's a failed experiment. Now, B Street came from 74, and I met with the county commissioner, Zach Coops, wrote an article about it. 74 corridor is important to us. And it came right in there to B Street. You could have left B Street alone, people going right to Spring Road, and get through this town. You can't direct everybody through. We're not all looking for backpacks and pillars, okay? The local residents, we've seen that. We need to get around. I live on 8th Street. I like to go to the Carlisle Point, and you continually kick me up Bedford Street when East Street is a perfectly wide street. Could be two-way. Open up that avenue. Let people get through this town. I don't know. You're directing everybody to this. I'm glad somebody redeveloped the Lear site, the Maslin site. But, that was prime real estate. You have a skate park there. And of all the places that we need sidewalks for safer travel, you see the sidewalk on Fairground Avenue? What's the point? I don't want to complain too much, I don't want to talk about my history of the town. I can go on with that another time, but the traffic is a mess. It's not safe. So go through your stats. Who's been hit? How many crashes there are? The Sentinel is not good at reporting. Now, I don't have much money. I can't even afford the $1 for 3 months or $1 for 6 months. So I just go by headline. But you can be fooled by the headlines. But, I go on the borough website. I'm not seeing an update on these things. People being choked, people being, assaulted, stabbed, down there by the skate park. It is dark. I know it's Norfolk Southern. Ask them to turn on some lights. We have an idle railway. We could have Amtrak. Ask Amtrak to come here. We have an avenue of transportation that could modernize this town, the center of this county. Right there, sitting there idle. I hear that train whistle up by the Carlisle Pool every day. I can hear that train whistle blowing. And, get Amtrak and Norfolk together, Norfolk Southern. And if the Millers don't want it on their property, take it back down to the old train station there at the cemetery, the Carlisle Park. Put in a train station there. Let the borough put some parking there. Turn this town on. People could come in 74th, 34, Route 11, 81, 76. You got a train station here. Train station in Harrisburg's nice. I used to take my daughter there. She went to Philadelphia Temple. But I had to drive there and had to get back. Well, it'd be nice just to take her here in town. I'd pay more. Convenient. Modernize the town. It's county seat, right? Town should modernize. Enough with Colonial Williamsburg. We need high rise. If I had my way, I'd have 20 floors of a skyscraper right behind Sadler. The Union Fire Company, just a parking lot back there now. The borough should give that to the county. Build a skyscraper. The county can give the courthouse to Sadler. Eventually we'll have a hospital in the center of town. Being professional people here 24/7. So you build a skyscraper. You have lots of tenants there. A lot of suites for people other than the courthouse. Underground parking. Get that Sadler Clinic on the square. Get Amtrak here. And you go out Spring Road. There's enough room there for the turnpike to have a cars only in and off. The Amtrak and the turnpike makes Carlisle products, Production Incorporated, whatever they are, it makes them more valuable. It brings people right to their doorstep. If ever they get tired of their car shows, imagine the value of that land for a business park. The train station and the turnpike there are cars only. Leave the trucks down there from Middlesex. It's a nuisance going down Route 11, get on the turnpike. We could be getting on right there at Spring Road, Cavalry Road. With North Middleton, Cave Hill Nature Center. good bridge there. And you know, Cave Hill used to be a unique place. Nobody knows really much about it. I've been back here recently, but we can work with Beckons, extend that street through to Longscap Road, because Longscap Road and Spring Road needs updated. It needs completely realigned out there. It could be updated, modernized, and the land around there could be rezoned and really worth something. It's a dangerous intersection there now. But if something happens on the Spring Road Turnpike Bridge, we're kind of trapped a little bit. So take Cave Hill Drive and extend it past Beckons out to Longscap Road, because North Middleton uses our school district. They buses drive by my house every day. The intersection there at Franklin and H Street, we have the curbing that's flush with the street. People drive over it, nice wide. Everybody can make a turn. It's not like this stuff they just did over in town. It's a mess. Just some ideas. But then once you go beyond my turnpike, and you go out here to Stairs Gap and you tunnel it, just like they do the other tunnels on the turnpike. A lot of people in Perry County going to work in Harrisburg, Camp Hill, Mechanicsburg, New Cumberland, Carlisle. It's tough going over that mountain when it's cloudy, rainy, snowy, foggy. Tunnel it. Leave that road for the scenic route. So, now you have a new courthouse here. Connect your county courthouses. Train station, turnpike, tunnel, and then you build a military hospital in New Bloomfield, Perry County. Even the name is beautiful over there. New Bloomfield, recuperate. That's the plan. That's how the whole area grows. You have a couple one-way streets here in town, could be two-way. You have a couple unfinished streets. Penn Street could be pushed through, you know, to College, especially if you get a train station there at the old train station. People can get in and out of this town, easy access. Cherry Street, up by the old P.R. Hoffman. Since you closed the high school hill, push Cherry Street through. Takes you right to B, your Wagner's Gap Road. There's a couple businesses now. P.R. Hoffman's there. You know, there's room for a street there. Just my ideas. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. There's a lot to unpack there.
Yes.
But you'll be happy to know that we, as far as pedestrian safety is concerned, we passed a Vision Zero resolution, and we will have an active transportation plan in place in the next couple of years, with the goal of limiting pedestrian and bicycle accidents and eliminating them, really, if possible. Some of the things you talked about are actually contradictory to safe pedestrian travel. I think what you really highlighted, though, is that I think at one point you said something about where I think I wrote it down. Bringing things together is not working. Things are going to be together no matter what we do, right? So what we have to do is plan for that. People are going to be walking around town as you were. People are going to be driving through town, as I'm sure you do, and you've experienced as a pedestrian. The things that we've done, so the road diet, the narrowing of streets, those things are tested and make drivers slow down. The bump outs that you see, I think you mentioned those allow pedestrians to be out where drivers can see them better and actually make it safer for pedestrians. So all those things are done, and others can speak probably much more educated than I can on these topics that we have on staff, but those are all done to make pedestrians safer. Some of the things you talked about on Hanover High Street, we don't have complete control over that, right? I'm sure you understand PennDOT controls those roads. Great idea on public transportation. I think we'd all love to have more public transportation in town. I can easily speak for council on that. I don't think we're going to have skyscrapers downtown, but we are working on having denser areas of town on that point. So, and there were some other things that I think we could address, but there was a lot of information there. We really appreciate your comments. Thank you. Yeah. Well, I want to you.
Buildings that are kind of high. You have Comfort Suites,
Mm-hmm.
and 1 and 2 West Penn are kind of high. They're just brick. You know, it's
Right.
81 and Turnpike, they weren't planned to be as big as they are now. It'll grow.
Right. I understand, Mr. Smith. I want to make sure others have an opportunity to. Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to speak on any topic of borough government? Okay. Do we have anybody by Zoom?
Nobody has their hand up.
Okay. All right. We're going to move on to presentations. So speaking of speaking of traffic calming, we have some representatives from Dawood to talk on Bedford and East Streets.
All right. Before Dogwood goes, I just want to remind council that at its November council meeting, you approved a contract with Dogwood to undertake planning and preliminary design associated with the next phase of the East Street and Bedford Street traffic calming project. You recall that I think it was in early 2020 where staff came to council during a workshop and discussed various traffic calming measures that resulted in some improvements made at the intersection of Kerr, Penn, and North Bedford Street that we referred to as phase one. So this is phase two, the next step in perhaps a multi-step approach to look at those two corridors.
Thank you, Mark. Just pulling up my PowerPoint here. All right. Good evening. My name is Danielle Deeroff. I'm with Dawood Engineering. Got Chad Decker and Joe Padone here as well. We're both involved in the project and we're involved with phase one. Happy to be here tonight to present some conceptual designs for phase two, which will hopefully address some pedestrian and bicycle safety issues in the borough. I guess to give kind of a project overview, we did complete phase one, which was the intersection of Bedford, Penn, and Kerrs, which involved some of those curb extensions. And when those were designed, they were designed to tie into phase two of the project, which I'll show a little bit later in this presentation. We're currently in conceptual design. Our plan here is to present some concepts here tonight, just collect feedback, comments. I think one of the things in particular we'd be looking for input on is actual locations of some of the traffic calming features that we're proposing. I'll get to that a little bit later, but on our concept plan, a lot of these features we kind of chose a location to show them at, but they can be placed at different locations within the corridors. So any feedback you have about where you think some of these things may be needed would be great for us. Following this meeting, our intent is to present to the public. In phase one, we presented at the Eastside Neighbors Association meeting, and I guess we had a greater turnout at a second one, which was combined with a town hall meeting that you hosted. And so I guess that's another point where I just wanted to get some feedback, was whether a single Eastside Neighbors Association meeting would be adequate for presenting kind of this larger concept, or whether we need to look at doing kind of a larger meeting, whether it's a town hall or just a separate meeting that's advertised to a larger audience. So just looking for some thoughts there. Our intent is to move to final conceptual design, kind of following feedback from you and feedback from the public, and then presenting hopefully in April to you a final concept that would then be presented in the future potentially for final design and construction, but no timeline right now beyond getting a conceptual design that has been vetted to you and the public. So to run through some of the components included in this project, I'm going to kind of run through some project components and then present the concept at the end here. This concept involves restriping, which will put bike lanes in both directions on, well, in one direction on Bedford Street and the opposite direction on East Street. And it also proposes some reverse angle parking, which I think the borough looked at a few years ago and got some public feedback on, and we're going to be looking for more on that. There's a lot of benefits to it, which I'm going to get into on the next couple slides here. We also have a possible reconfiguration of the Bedford and East Street intersection, which would be a roundabout potentially, and I will review some traffic calming measures that will hopefully improve vehicle speeds and pedestrian safety. So looking at reverse angle parking, there's a lot of benefits to this. I think it was first looked into officially by PennDOT back in like 2001 in Pottstown. Some of the benefits here that you see are definitely improved visibility with drivers facing out. They can generally, you would propose it with a bike lane adjacent to it, and since they're parked facing out, they don't have to look back over their shoulder to see bicyclists coming or other vehicles. They can just kind of turn a little bit to their left and see people coming. It's easier for loading and unloading. The trunk is accessed from the sidewalk. It's often safer for children because when you open the passenger doors, they can't walk into the street. They're kind of forced to walk backwards to the sidewalk. It's actually easier than parallel parking. A lot of people who are unfamiliar with reverse angle parking are a little unnerved by it, but it's really the same movements. When you parallel park, you pull up, you pull back, and then you often have to pull forward again and sometimes do it over again if you don't do it right. But with reverse angle, it's really an easier maneuver. You pull up in front of the spot and then you just back in at an angle. Most people figure it out pretty quickly. And then having it adjacent to bike lanes, the bicyclists are more visible, and also they don't get hit by your door when you open it to get out of your car. To show a little just guidance that's out there with them, I just wanted to point out that this reverse angle parking it's noted in national publications and PennDOT publications. This is some guidance from PennDOT. It's in their newest design manual. Some of the reasons that you do it are to increase parking, improve sight distance between drivers and bicyclists, and when you do have a bike lane, it's recommended because your front face out and you can see them. And I do just note on here some minimum dimensions. So when we get to the concept, we took a topographic survey of the curbs along these two streets so that we could accurately measure whether there's adequate space curb to curb to do the back and angle parking. So these are some minimum dimensions, and there were some blocks that we were unable to fit the back and angle parking. And one of the things is this isn't something you ever want to squeeze in, because if it's a little too tight, you'll end up with more overhang on the sidewalk, which limits sidewalk space. So that's just something I wanted to point out. This is some guidance that's in the MUTCD. Again, they recommend that you place a bicycle lane in front of this reverse angle parking because it's more visible, and there's guidance on signage and paint for that bike lane. And I was just going to show a couple examples of where there's already some reverse angle parking in District 8 and in the state. They have it in Lancaster on Mulberry Street. Before any of you ask, the one weird thing about this is I don't know why they didn't put the bike lane adjacent to the back and angle parking, seeing as that's the recommended practice. But I did want to show that they do have the on-street back and angle parking. There's also some on Chocolate Avenue in Hershey. There's some on Broad Street in York. And then again, kind of where it started in Pennsylvania was in Pottstown, and they have a great example with the bike lanes adjacent to it. And you can see just in that picture there with Pottstown how visible the bicyclists would be to anyone pulling out of their parking space. Some bike lane design guidance. Typical width is, the minimum width is 4 feet. We typically try to achieve 5 to 7 feet. And in our concept design, where we had extra space curb to curb, we tried to give that to the bike lane or a buffer on either side of the bike lane to make bicyclists feel safer. Buffers, applying them on either side. If the bike lane is adjacent to the travel lane, that buffer just gives them a little more comfort from traveling cars going by them. And adjacent to parking, it prevents the bicyclists from getting hit by doors. And then I did want to mention parking protected bike lanes. This is something that is always an option when you have the bike lane adjacent to parallel parking, is whether you want it which is kind of shown in this picture here. It's parking protected, which means that the parked cars are protecting the bike lane and the bicyclists from moving traffic. Parking protected bike lanes have not been adopted by PennDOT because the Pennsylvania Vehicle Code requires parking within 12 inches of a curb. So you typically won't see parking protected bike lanes on a state route. And that's just because they can't implement something that's going to be breaking the vehicle code. That being said, there are a lot of localities in Pennsylvania who have started implementing these. And interestingly enough, they are on a number of state routes. Whether those were coordinated through specific studies with PennDOT, I am not sure, but there are a variety of places on state routes where they have parking protected bike lanes, so they're not unheard of. This is Chestnut Street in Philadelphia. Walnut Street in Lancaster is a great example. They have parking protected bike lanes down the entire length of Walnut Street. JFK Boulevard in Philadelphia, another state route. So we do show it in some places on our concept, and again, it's something that can be implemented or it can not be implemented depending on what we decide and coordination there. The main thing when it comes to not meeting vehicle code is just enforcement. Are you going to ticket people for not parking within 12 inches of a curb? Another thing that you'll see on our concept plan are bike boxes. These would definitely be something new in Carlisle, and they would probably take a little bit of education for drivers to understand how they work. But the general idea here is that if you have an intersection where there's bike lanes on both streets, if there's a bicyclist turning left, you don't want them to stay to the right of traffic because they will either have to try to cut in front of the cars or wait until all the cars have gone for them to make their left turn. So bike boxes allow the bicyclists who are turning left to sit in front of all the vehicle traffic, and as soon as they get the green light to turn left, they can do that safely. To run through a few of the traffic calming elements that you'll see in our concept plans, this is a table that's in PennDOT's traffic calming handbook. These are typical traffic calming measures that are designed to reduce vehicle speeds and improve pedestrian safety. The ones that I've highlighted here are the ones that we have included in our concept. And the way you kind of read this table is that an empty box means no effect really. A half-filled box means some effect. A full box means greater effect. And so kind of looking down the list, the big thing that I'm sure kind of sticks out is that emergency response, that a bunch of those are fully filled in boxes. And there's notes on the slides and in the traffic calming handbook about how many seconds emergency response is impacted by some of these features. I mean, you'll see it on raised intersection, it's fully filled in, but you'll see those going in many cities. So it's not like they're not used, it's just you're going to have a couple second delay. So I'm going to just run through some of these measures and then I'll pull up our concept plans. Curb extensions are obviously what we implemented in phase 1. Some of the notes about them: they protect parking, they improve pedestrian visibility by putting them out in front, they shorten crossing distances, they do slow traffic by funneling it through a narrower opening. One of the other features that was on the list at the bottom there is just roadway narrowing. So it's shown that when you narrow lanes and narrow streets, cars typically slow down. They may provide opportunity for landscaping or texture treatments, and they prevent illegal parking close to intersections, which is always a benefit. Chicanes are kind of the fun one that we threw in the concept. I think the biggest thing you'll see in the concept is that they have the biggest impact on available parking. But basically what they are a series of islands that cause a car to have to swerve a little bit, and basically it's just, hey, slow down, you have to kind of weave around these islands. So they can reduce speeds quite a bit. You can see here 5 to 13 miles an hour while you're going through them, and 1 to 6 miles an hour kind of in the vicinity of them. They provide opportunity for landscaping, but again, they do include loss of parking and can make snow removal a little more difficult. Speed humps, everyone knows about speed humps. I would say the biggest downside to these is that they can be noisy, vehicles going over them at high speeds, but they do slow people down, and they don't pose risks for bicyclists or anything like that, and they're relatively inexpensive. Raised intersections, minor effects on speeds, but in general, I think they make drivers a lot more aware of where they are. They make them more aware of pedestrians. They decrease conflicts between vehicles and pedestrians. Opportunity for landscaping, but they are more expensive, so that's something to consider. And I do have a couple examples here from some raised intersections in Harrisburg. And then I think this is it before I jump into the concept. I do have just a parking count table. This table matches exactly what is in our concept, so the numbers in here could change if we add or remove elements from our concept. I think the biggest thing to note in here is that loss of 9 spots on East Street. That's right in the area of the chicanes, and they can be added, they can be removed. One of the areas that we're showing them is actually in front of some homes that have driveways in the back, so it might not be as much of an issue, but a lot of that will probably come out in public involvement. I think the other thing to note, just looking at parking counts, is typically you would expect angled parking to increase the total number of parking spaces. In this case, we saw quite a big increase on East Street, but not as much as we thought on Bedford. Part of the reason is on Bedford there were a number of blocks where there just wasn't space for it, and the other locations, which I can kind of point out in the concept, are when you have driveways adjacent to the back and angle parking, they take up a little bit more space, so you can't fit in as many because you have to leave kind of a wider gap for that driveway, so I'll point that out. And then last thing is cost. Right now I don't have any cost information to present to you. The idea here is that we will provide a pretty detailed cost estimate with the final concept, and we'll be able to price out probably a range, like, oh, if we want to add more curb extensions, they'll be approximately this much per intersection or per corner. So right now, no major cost information. We're just looking for feedback on our designs, but we will have that when we present to you our final concept. Any questions before I pull up the concept?
Any questions so far? No? Okay, go ahead.
All right. Start with, I'll just jump right into the intersection. I'll show that first. So this is a concept that we developed for the Bedford and East Street intersection, which right now has kind of these islands in the middle. You have turns in and out from Henderson Street and traffic coming a bunch of different directions. So we looked at a concept for a roundabout. We did run this through with a larger school bus. We had some coordination with the school district to ask about their bus routes. They actually informed us that it's usually not their biggest school buses going through here, and that their buses, I don't think they said they ever would be making the full circle around here, but we designed it to accommodate that anyway. And we would be coordinating this with the fire department like we did with phase 1 to make sure that their vehicles can get through here. But I think this is a nice concept because it provides quite a bit of opportunity for landscaping. Could potentially do something nice in this green space at the intersection there, put a bench or dog waste bins or something like that, just make it a nice little green area. And the one thing I guess I'll point out that again would have to be coordinated in public involvement is there would be a loss of a couple parking spaces right in front of those first 3 homes on the corner. So
Danielle, those roundabout designs, they require mountable curbs anyway, right?
Along the middle there, where I'm showing kind of the lighter color on the outside of the grass circle, that would be a mountable apron so that any larger vehicles could get around there.
Right. Okay.
And the little island on Henderson Street would likely need to be striped instead of some sort of concrete island. And I guess I'll also mention we did the reason we're kind of cutting into the one corner on the lower right side is because there's quite a large utility pole on the lower left side. So we're trying to avoid impacting that corner there by shifting everything to the right a little bit, so that we don't have to relocate that pole.
May I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead.
In this diagram, I see that there is a transition from one side of the street to the other side of the street for the bike lane. Is there a reason? Can you describe more about why that is?
So
Further back on the, yeah, we can't really see it in the overhead, but further down the road to the, if you go the other way.
this way.
I don't know, to be honest.
North is to the left.
Sorry,
South is to the right.
to the left.
Or-
There's like a
Oh,
green, yeah.
here.
Yes.
Okay.
yes. Sorry.
Yep. No. So that transition is really just because so on the block on the far left, we could not fit angled parking. So you'll see what we're showing there. That's actually an example of where we're showing parking protected bike lane. So the bike lane is adjacent to the curb. There's a little bit of parking on the outside of it. And then you have a buffer, a travel lane, and more parallel parking. On the next block down, we could fit the angled parking. And we're just kind of showing it wherever we can. There's actually a pretty big increase in number of spaces. So that transition there is just bringing the bike lane out in front of the back and angle parking.
I'm sorry, I said north is to the left. North is to the right on that.
What?
North is to the right. I said north is to the left.
Oh, yeah.
North is to the right. Yeah.
Um,
Just I don't want everybody to be disoriented.
Is my mouse visible up there? Yeah, a little bit. Okay. So I guess I'll kind of run down. We'll go up East Street and then down Bedford, just kind of running through. And again, most of the things that we're showing on here can be applied in different locations. We just kind of chose somewhere to put them. So this first intersection, we're showing some curb extensions. Those are probably the easiest to put just about wherever. Our thinking here, at least at the very beginning of the corridor, was that if you have a whole lot of traffic coming down South Street and turning up east, you provide a narrow opening right there at the beginning so they're not flying around the corner, and it kind of sets the tone for the corridor that things are a little tighter. So we have the reverse angle parking on one side, parallel parking on the other. We did show some green paint and those skip markings through intersections so that anyone coming up a side street just takes note that there might be a bicyclist coming. Moving through, nothing major here. Parallel parking and reverse angle. So this is the first intersection where we're showing some bike boxes. Again, these curb extensions are totally optional, just a concept. The way the bike box works, of course, here is that if they're turning into the bike lane on High Street, they can pull right up in front, and as soon as they get the green, they can make their left turn uninhibited. Same with if they're on High Street turning onto East Street, they are right out in front and can very easily make that turn without worrying about getting hit by a car. Here's where you'll see another kind of diagonal transition where we went from one block where we had the back and angle to another where we couldn't fit it. So I think I have noted here this block is only 34.5 feet wide. So we couldn't fit the back and angle, so we just have a bike lane and parking on either side. This intersection, we're showing a concept for a raised intersection. I think this is an intersection that sees a little bit more pedestrian activity, and the raised intersection definitely provides opportunity to improve pedestrian visibility. You can see we're really tightening up each of the crossings. You could also accomplish that with just regular curb extensions, but it definitely is a big benefit here, how much shorter those crossing distances are and how much you can put pedestrians out in front of the vehicles. So the way this works is basically you would still construct a curb, so you'd still see the curb in the concrete, but everything else, the whole intersection would be at the same height as the curb. So drivers will go up a little bit, cross, and then go down a little bit on the other side. And pedestrians will be like above them when they're kind of waiting at the stop, which is nice.
Quick clarification. Can we imply that the green is not just to draw our attention, but that would actually be the color of the lane?
Yes, there
Okay.
would be green paint there. It
Okay.
would be green thermoplastic paint, and that's optional. It does have an added expense and maintenance costs, but it's definitely beneficial in intersections just for making drivers aware that there are bicyclists coming.
I would add that you could also, with a raised intersection, typically that's a different color. You could use, you know, concrete with a dye in it.
Are we now permitted to use green on bike lanes? Does anybody know the answer? Because it used to be we couldn't when we did the road dye. That was one of the questions we had. That was long ago.
The new MUTCD does have provisions for green paint. PennDOT has not adopted the new MUTCD yet. It came out in December. They basically said they have to do a comprehensive review of it before they modify any of their publications. But the national standards now do include much guidance on the use of green paint for bike lanes. But I don't.
Yeah, that was my understanding.
Okay.
Yeah.
Questions?
We can real quick. Yeah.
How will snow removal be coordinated with this? Because it's one of the problems that pedestrians have, especially on the corners, where the snow accumulates and then as it starts to freeze, it becomes really dangerous. So how will snow removal be implemented here?
I guess that's a Mark question.
Yeah, if something such as this concept would be done, then you know there would need to be additional maintenance by Public Works to clear that area.
Danielle, you were trying to cruise through, and we just started
Oh, no problem.
sending questions your way.
No problem at all.
That's
That's what we're here for.
I shouldn't say cruise through.
This isn't super noteworthy, but we just kind of put a little buffer here, a little concrete island here to protect bicyclists from anyone making a wide turn from Penn Street onto East Street. Again, here you kind of have a little bit of a transition from the angle to the parallel. Wherever we couldn't fit the angle, but we did have a good amount of space, we kind of divided that to buffer the bike lane on either side. And this is where you see the chicanes, which again, they would be these little concrete raised islands. The travel lane is up here, and so basically they'd be coming in. They'd have to weave a little bit to the right, weave a little bit to the left, and back to the right. And you'll see it limits parking kind of above them, and in this case just above them. We lose a couple spots there, and again, they certainly would pose a little bit of a challenge to snow removal, but you do get pretty big reductions in vehicle speeds. We show them on the next block too. This is where you saw the loss of 9 parking spaces in my chart. But again, this is also where some of these homes have parking behind them, so it's a little bit less of an impact than it might seem. But again, everything that we're showing here is purely conceptual and can be relocated as needed.
Danielle, can you go south a little bit to the railroad crossing?
Yep.
So one of the comments that we get quite often is that East Street is essentially functioning as a raceway, and you get 2 lanes of travel and folks taking advantage of the elevation of the railroad and hopping over that and just zipping down. So you know the chicanes there sort of were put in near the railroad because of that historical usage.
And they could be just proposed on this one block and skipped on the next if parking's the issue. Or, all of that is up for discussion. This again is where we have a parking protected bike lane, so you'll see There are some spots designated kind of between the bike lane and the travel lane with striping in between to show where parking's not available. And that is, if you take a deeper look, like at Walnut Street in Lancaster, you'll see a very similar treatment where they hatch out spaces that can't be used and stripe the ones that can. Again, just kind of weaving back and forth because of the back and angle parking. And we're at the intersection. So on this concept, we're just kind of showing the bike lanes continuing straight up. The bike lanes would be curbside here, and once they hit the end, we would likely just have signage for now that bike lane ends and bicyclists would dismount and have to find their way from there. Down in the other direction, it's mostly the same. I'm not sure. So we're showing parking protected bike lanes down Bedford Street for the first couple blocks where we don't have space for the back and angle parking. There's no change in number of spaces available with this concept. Moving through. If you have questions about this, it's because it's advised that bicyclists cross a railroad track at 90 degrees. So basically we're keeping the bike lane curbside, and then as they get to the railroad track, they cross at 90 degrees, and then we're showing just a regular bike lane that's not parking protected. So this is phase one of the project. I said I would kind of point out how they tie together. The way that this curb extension here was designed on this corner was to accommodate the reverse angle parking should you decide to do it. It works fine without it, but it was designed so that it comes out further, and also with that in mind that the bike lane is here. So really, vehicles turning from Penn Street onto Bedford are coming all the way out to this travel lane here. So there should be clearance there for them to make that turn, since they're really turning pretty far out. But everything else that we already implemented would tie in nicely to the concepts that we're showing. Moving through, it's much of the same. So this is where I just wanted to point out the reason that we didn't get as much increased parking is just because when you have a driveway entrance like this, due to the angle of the spaces, you can't get quite as close to the driveways, which is why we didn't see a huge increase in parking on some of these blocks. We showed a speed hump. Again, those can be put anywhere. They're a little noisy, but they definitely reduce vehicle speeds, and they're low cost. Showing a couple more bike boxes at High Street. And I think that is about it. So, really appreciate you listening to this whole presentation. If you have any feedback, you're welcome to share here or pass it along. But yeah, we're definitely looking for any input you have on locations of some of these items so that we can work towards a final concept.
Any questions, comments?
This is so damn exciting. I can hardly restrain myself. So what we have here are an outline of, at the complete north side of town, a contiguous bike safe plan, which is amazing, and we're getting close to a conceptual layout of what that is. My only consideration would be in areas, and this is just from being having lived in a municipality that really did a lot for dedicated bike lanes, is in areas where we didn't have parking buffered separation, which is great, should always be the standard, that maybe we consider putting some additional green paint where there is not that buffer in some, or starting off with maybe some of the higher trafficked areas, but I might consider some sort of consideration of doing more using that contrast where we don't have the buffer along that corridor. But that's my only comment.
It's a great idea.
I'm sorry. I was just gonna, I mean, I just like protected bike lanes, so I would rather see it all protected just to be that person. But um, I just think about it like the schools that are basically at the ends of each of these, and allowing and like the ability of teaching kids that they have a way to get to use some of these corridors and feel completely confident as a parent, that like the younger folks could do it. So that's I understand that the reason why we got the buffered is actually more because we couldn't get the parking, but I would flip the recommendation. I know that you've already done all this work though, but it is just my view has been that as we are putting all this effort and money in, is to build the roads the way that we really want the future of Carlisle to allow navigation. So I guess that's my view, is if we're gonna do it, like I would rather see contiguous, buffered, protected bike lanes. I also know that I've seen reverse parallels. I don't have a problem with that, but it was not well. Um, I'm not saying that they wanted bike lanes either. So, but they it was not the most engaging on that topic when I remember at the meeting. But that is my personal opinion.
I guess I'm mostly just going to be echoing what Brenda said. So I kind of had a question as to if we did parking protected bike lanes throughout this corridor as opposed to the reverse angle parking, would that result in a significant reduction in parking, or would parking mostly just stay the same then, because it would just be moving where the cars are parked out, right?
It would pretty much stay exactly the same.
Okay, yeah, and I guess similarly, I do recall that there was concern or pushback against the angle parking before, and on a whole, I just you know, as opposed to like having this corridor transition between protected bike lane versus angle parking non-protected, I just am curious, you know, if it might be better to, as Brenda said, basically just have parking protected bike lanes throughout, even if that means we aren't getting a significant an increase in the number of parking spaces, and you know, to the people who are parking there. I based on the prior feedback we got, I don't know that there'd be a whole lot of pushback if we eliminated the reverse angle parking, but you know, just kind of food for thought. And I guess I don't know that I necessarily love the idea of doing this, but just to Mr. Smith, who was here, I believe he brought up about East Street and the width of it. I mean, whether or not it could just be a 2-lane road as opposed to, so I mean, this conceptually you're kind of narrowing both of these lanes down to 1 lane, right? Well, I mean, I guess the northern portion of Bedford is already 1 lane for a part of it. Is there enough space on East Street that it could be a 2-lane, 2-direction road, as opposed to, you know, 2 lanes in one direction as it is now, or narrowed down to 1 lane? Not necessarily
not
saying
with the
that
bike
I think
lane.
that's the way we should go, but I just, because that comment was brought up, wanted to question if that would be feasible.
Not with the bike lane.
Okay, fair. Yeah, good to know.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Jack.
I just want to ask a brief question about the reverse angle parking. I'm not always a super confident parallel parker or person who backs into a parking space. And so those photos all showed cars going with their noses facing out. Oops, sorry. With their noses facing out, which is great. But how often is that realistically the case? Because, like, if I was driving one way and I saw an open spot, I might pop around so that I can pull in and not back in. Especially if there's traffic behind me, I get a little flustered. But
It's pretty, if these were striped this way, it's pretty challenging to make that turn all the way back to get into the spots.
sorry. Yeah, I'm just saying is that like 100% of the time people back in. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Even on areas of the road where it might be 2-way or could be 2-way?
Well, it wouldn't be in this scenario. There wouldn't be any two-way.
Yeah, if you're thinking about
Okay.
Pottstown, which had bi-directional traffic
Yeah.
and back and angle, you do
That's what
sometimes
I'm.
see
Yeah.
people swing around and park on the other side of the street.
So they
face
can
in.
pull in.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. I just wanted to make sure I was understanding correctly.
I wanted to say the reverse parking in Lancaster. So I had to do that going to visit my son at his job, and it is different, and it does make you nervous because there were so many. It's a busy street, so many cars are coming. It does make you nervous, but I will say to do it. But I will say this: it really is so much easier when you're leaving because you're not. Like you said before, you're not having to, okay, so let me reverse, let me check here, make sure nothing is coming, because sometimes cars pull up, they come so fast, you don't always see them until, well, now you're out and they're hitting you or whatever. So I will say, and I don't know if I was here whenever they were fighting about or not happy about the reverse parking, but I am an advocate for it, even though I'm not perfect at doing it always. I'm not, but it is easier coming out. It really is. When you pull out of there, you already see the cars, so you know what's coming right from the jump, and all you have to do is go. So um, I personally like that, but again,
Pulling
I
out is
get it.
just like pulling out of a driveway.
Yeah, it really is.
Go ahead, Brent.
I'll just add that the people that live on the blocks that would be affected by the reverse angle parking are already parallel parking on a regular basis. So the ones who would be using the reverse angle regularly are already probably pretty good at backing up. So it's not like you're introducing it to a downtown area where it's not necessarily being used before. So
Yeah, many of those areas get parked up enough that they can't pull straight in. Yeah, go ahead, Brent.
So I have a question about the reverse angle parking, and I think you showed the Philadelphia example where the reverse angled parking is actually protected because it's away from the curb, so between the curb and the reverse backing would solve both those issues where the parking wouldn't be eliminated. Actually, yeah, there it is, that one, right? Where if you back in an angle and then there's a curb, so then they know where the far line is and there's some sort of color, or if they put, when you're at a parking lot, they have a little stopper, so then your car can't go past a point, so like your back wheels hit something and it would recognize that. Is that the issue because of like pickup trucks? It would still block. Is that a consideration or something like that where we can have that protected, but at the same time use the back and angled parking for the back? Because I think you said the Pennsylvania code doesn't recognize that right now, but I was just curious if you've seen more examples of that on these ones up here.
They often do put curb stops behind reverse angle parking to prevent vehicles from overhanging the sidewalk. The biggest thing, it's an added cost. It affects snow removal, but I think in our discussions that the borough doesn't plow the parking lanes anyway, so that wouldn't be as much of a problem. So it'd mainly be the added cost and maintenance fees, but they do frequently put those curb stops to prevent overhang onto the sidewalk.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Thanks. So I did just want to, in terms of next steps, I mean, I think it's great to at least start with going to an Eastside Neighbors meeting, but just knowing the amount of people that typically attend those and the fact this is pretty much redesigning two streets that are, this whole entire corridor. I don't know. I know it might delay things, but I think it might be prudent to have some sort of public meeting just on this that is, pretty well advertised, just so that people who are interested know there's a dedicated meeting they can come to. In addition to this, right now, or that Eastside Neighbors meeting, just to advertise as best as possible and get additional feedback on some of these concepts, particularly some of the ones that are newer, like the chicanes or the bike box. I mean, I think most people probably aren't super familiar with those, so I think it'd be good to get feedback on those, whether positive or negative, and as well as the concept as a whole. So I know it might delay things, but I think it would be worthwhile to delay things to ensure there's an additional public meeting to get that feedback. I don't know whether that's, you know, having the meeting here or at a different location, or timeline wise what the plan for that would be, but in terms of next steps, I think it would be
So
good.
give him everything that's on the menu and then get some feedback. on
Right.
it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And I mean, I think I know that I know that Eastside Neighbors Association is happy for you all to attend the next meeting in February on the 14th, and that'd be great. But generally speaking, there you know tends to be a handful of people, a dozen people there, and between now and then, I don't know how well it would be to be able to advertise just that. I mean, there's going to be more covered in that meeting than just this one topic. So just having a meeting specifically dedicated to this that's well advertised, I think, would be good.
And I guess I just have a quick question. So for that meeting, we have this concept, but our bike friends aren't here tonight. I have a feeling our bike friends would would ask the same question. So I guess is there any chance to have a conceptual that shows like a contiguous buffered path for either a meeting or putting it out on social media? Because if you do get that question, like what is the I guess when it comes to these types of meetings, even for me right now, it seems like this is the answer with a couple tweaks. So if we take it to a meeting, like that's sort of the way it comes about. And I know that we are spending money. Thank you for coming and doing all this work. But it's the money to actually build it is also extremely expensive. So I just want to that's why I'm asking the question, because to put the money in and then just not get it to exactly what what it could be, and that's just me. So that's my question. Like, could there be a version that would show that?
We could certainly talk to Mark and the team about revising the concept. Otherwise, I think the options are we could certainly just look at individual blocks. I mean, this block here, this one's not parking protected. We can look at a parking protected one. I mean, those would be pretty representative of what the rest would look like. Like this block here is a pretty good example. This one's parking protected. We have a small buffer here adjacent to the bike lane. And again, those buffers just kind of grow and shrink depending on how much space you have curb to curb. We could also kind of just put together typical sections that show, like if you're on the street, what the lane configuration looks like. But we can definitely talk about what we want to show for that.
What, does council think it would be better to make some adjustments to this to show that, and not go on the 14th, but not have Dawood go on the 14th to Eastside Neighbors, and sort of just have staff go there and discuss this and try to promote it, so that they perhaps at their March meeting can round more people up. I'm just thinking about having them make changes, the cost of that versus the cost of attending a meeting where not too many people show up.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, I think that might be a good idea as kind of like a first step, and then like a primer meeting where staff comes, gets additional feedback with the goal of then having like a month later a subsequent meeting that's just focused on this, that maybe we do have revised conceptual design if we need for that, as opposed to redoing the design and having two different meetings. I think that what you're kind of putting forward there might be a good idea. I don't know what other people's thoughts are.
So, just so I'm clear, the next version will show a contiguous parking protected bike corridor all the way from Hanover to south on Bedford. Was that? That's what I thought.
Our intent was to gather feedback from you. Originally, our intent was to present the same concept to the public, gather all the feedback, and then come back April or whenever it is with. We took into account all this feedback. This is the concept that we're presenting that takes that feedback into account.
That's a great response. That was actually intended for council here.
Oh. Sorry.
So what I heard from our comments was that I think there's consensus that we wanted, whenever, them to go back and present a plan with it, whether it's a combination or all parallel parking or angled parking at least shows a contiguous buffer parking corridor along Bedford and east. That's what I thought I heard.
I mean, that's what I would like, but it's,
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question though is then, do we, you know, because we are interested in that, move forward with having a redesign of the conceptual design here before it's presented like in a larger public meeting, or do we have like a presentation at a public forum about the design as it is now? Maybe we share like council had this feedback, and then there's a redesign as opposed to, right? Which I think is kind of what you're saying, right? We just kind of like share this first.
Yeah, and then do the whole entire redesign instead of redesign after redesign.
Right. So it's like that's our feedback, but also get everybody else's
Yeah.
feedback on this, and then factor all that together before redesign is done. Does that make sense?
That's fine with me. I would like, you know, as we brief it though, I think we should be very clear that council seems favorable to have the entire segment be parking protected, which isn't necessarily showing up, and just to kind of showcase that we've been briefed, we have some thoughts. It's not expressed in the current design, but we should be very explicit that we should showcase that when we brief this plan with the public.
Right. Yeah. And I imagine there. I think Jeff, as you said, there's probably less pushback on the bike lanes than there is on the parking configuration. Yeah. So I think that sounds like a plan. I saw some smiles over there. I wasn't sure if that was that's a good idea or.
I'll ask the rest of the team here, Chad or Jeff.
I think we could certainly showcase our blocks that have the curbside lighting, and then the feedback from that. Because honestly, what they have here, it's a true menu, right? We've got the chicanes, we've got the roundabout, we've got the flat boxes. So we're not advocating for one or the other. It's really for you guys, the public, to look at that menu and decide what you want best. So,
There's enough sampling we can say, well, this can fit elsewhere. Yeah.
that helps when it's just even described like that, because I guess I was riding my bike along with you, right? And I'm like, right, and so I'm just literally riding my bike in my brain along it, and just also thinking of I feel pretty comfortable on my bike, but other people don't, and sort of like I know that you did a very good job of trying to ensure like that bikes do have safety throughout it, but I think cars have to figure out what a bike box is. Even bikes have to figure out what a bike box is. So I'm just the more transitions, the just are concerning to me. So I think that's why it was good that you walked us along, but kind of looking at a segment like as like this is a protected parking, this is and sort of looking at it in those kind of I know you did it on the overall conceptual, but even on at the actual block would be helpful in describing it as a menu.
Okay, so
Sounds
we're
like
all
maybe planning for a slightly bigger, more well-attended meeting in March.
right. Yeah. We're all on the same page on all those. Yeah. I always defer to everybody else, and then I didn't ask some questions that I had on some of the details. And it's not going to change any of the conversation that we've had. Just a curiosity about the chicanes. I know it sounded like, I don't know if you expressed this exactly, but you at least alluded to it, that the locations of those, not only because of the railroad tracks, but also because of the lack of need of parking there. But I imagine chicanes are probably similar to speed humps and speed bumps that people speed up in between them. And you ideally want to have those approaches where there's going to be pedestrian interaction, which of course we're not doing here. We're just trying to keep people from being Bo and Luke Duke over the tracks, right? And I've seen that happen. I mean that happens. And the other question, probably not. You were nodding, so that was it. Yeah, I'm on the right track there. And we probably not ideal to put the chicanes elsewhere along this road because of the parking issues,
Yeah,
right?
it really they're very dependent on having the right width available and the parallel parking. We might have more opportunity for them with if we don't have any of the reverse angle, but I'm trying to picture if they would work with the parking on the outside. I think they would. I'd have to look at it, but
Yeah.
we might have more opportunity for them if we eliminate the
If that's where it goes, yeah. Okay. Other question is just sort of when we have the buffered parking, I'm not sure who can answer, or buffered bike lanes. A snow removal question again, because we're going to remove snow for the cars. It's going to be difficult to remove snow for along the bike lanes.
So right now our practice is to only plow the travel lanes, and if there's a protected bike lane, we wouldn't be able to get in there and plow those.
Yeah, I'd be careful saying travel lanes to this group. That's a travel lane too.
The motorized vehicle travel lane. And you know there are places with protected bike lanes in very cold climates that are designed for snow removal as part of that.
Okay.
But they would be likely wider than what we have here.
Yeah, for better or worse, we're tending to get less and less snow every year. So, Councillor Hicks would love to talk about that.
Sorry. So to clarify, next step wise is the idea then that staff would just present at February's Eastside Neighbors meeting, and then in terms of having a bigger presentation in March, would the goal be that we'd reach out to the Eastside Neighbors meeting to ask that we could do it there, or do we want to try to have like a separate meeting that is just on this, that we're kind of, that, you know, the borough is organizing essentially?
How busy are the agendas? I guess
Well, not often that busy. However, I know that they're organizing an Easter egg hunt, so that March meeting would be their last meeting to cover things right before that. So I don't necessarily want to like try to hijack their meeting right before they have an event they're trying to plan.
Mm-hmm.
Typically not that busy, but that one may be more so, which is just kind of a concern that might come up. However, not to say that, you know, they might be amenable to this, and then just the people that are helping to organize it stay after, and I can bring that up.
Yeah,
I can ask. I can
let
gauge that.
Let them guide
as
that.
to,
You can be flexible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can try to gauge that.
Okay. And there are other calendars we have to consider too, right? Okay. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Is everything clear enough for the team? Okay. Sometimes we're not, so we do our best. Okay. Thank you.
Thank
you. Next up, Birdtown, Pennsylvania. I think we have Heidi on Zoom.
Yeah, as we're bringing Heidi up, Mr. Mayor, a colleague and friend of mine, Jeff Redmore, lives here in Carlisle, works with Army War College, and he reached out and as an avid bird watcher, he had been familiar with an organization here in Pennsylvania called Birdtown, Pennsylvania, that he thought there might be interest in council. I affirmed that I thought there would be interest in the light of several reasons. Is I know that in the Climate Action Committee, we've been talking in general about the benefits of model light ordinance, and some of the conversation in the context of that was, you know, the effect on migration patterns and different types of ecological systems. It can have some damaging effects when you have unnecessary high intensity light. So this seemed like it was a good time for us to collect some more information, to see what some of the programs, probably best practices, is something we potentially would gain from being part of this. I think what we'll learn is a sort of an accreditation process, but I think more importantly, becoming more sensitive and more informed about the effects of our energy systems on ecology. So that was the context. Thanks for indulging that request. Thank you, Jeff, for bringing it up to my attention. And yeah, I look forward to hearing from Heidi. Thanks for joining us today.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Is it possible to have my video available so I can say hi to everyone? I'm not able to
You should be able to
start
turn
my
on your video. Yeah.
Great.
And thanks for enduring our long conversation on our bike path.
Oh my gosh, it was
Appreciate your
very
time.
interesting. I really enjoyed listening to it, actually. It was a really good study. I'm still not able to open my video or start the video.
Try to. Hold on.
No worries. Thank you for helping me. And while I'm waiting, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to hear my presentation tonight. A special thank you to both Jeff for setting this up as well as Jared. Jared, I really enjoyed talking with you last Thursday. Thank you for finding time for me so quickly within just a few days of having the opportunity to give this presentation to the council. I really appreciate your time.
I apologize. It's not letting me do anything to your video either.
Okay. Well, you know what? No worries. I'm sorry I don't get to see you guys in person like this. You know, I appreciate you making this allowance for me too. I live 2 hours away. I'm coming from Doylestown Township, so I appreciate the opportunity to do this via Zoom. But you know, not to further take your time up, we can just go ahead and start with the presentation. So again, thank you. If you could go ahead and advance to the next slide. So I always like to start with our mission. Birdtown, Pennsylvania works in partnership with local municipalities and like-minded organizations such as Audubon to promote community-based conservation actions to create a healthier, more sustainable environment for birds, wildlife, and people. Next. So our organization has been in place for over 12 years now in the state. It is a statewide program. We have 48 programs across 9 counties. We are owned by Pennsylvania Audubon Council, which I'll tell you a little bit more about in a minute. And we have partnerships with various conservation groups, including We Conserve PA, several Audubon chapters across the state, and building on that, and also the Bird City Network, which is an international organization that we're part of. Next. These are the 48 different bird towns in the 9 counties, and that we're growing. I just want to give you an idea of, you know, the scope of it. We have most of our bird towns are in Southeast PA, but we are working with you as well as Lemoyne, Harrisburg, and Mechanicsburg in your area, and then also bringing Birdtown to Pittsburgh, working very closely with the Audubon Society of Western PA to accomplish that. Next. So why do we focus on birds? There's lots of reasons. Let me just get this a little closer. So birds keep our ecosystems running smoothly. I give you lots of examples here. I'm not going to run through everything because I know you have a very busy evening, but birds do eat 400 to 500 tons of insects per year. They also help with reducing diseases such as rabies, distemper, and plague by taking care of carcasses. They also, such as owls and hawks, help keep our mice and rat populations down. They also bring us joy and beauty. They also help let us know how the environment is healthy or not. They're very sensitive to toxins and pollutants. Birds are everywhere. We have 45 million bird watchers in the US, and we're spending about $41 billion to view those birds. Oh, hi, everybody. But they really need our help. The Breeding Bird Survey has showed that populations are declining from anywhere to 30 to 77%, depending on what species you're looking at. Especially if you think about grassland birds, for example, their populations are declining. But there are some positive stories too. The woodpecker populations are doing well, partly because of all the ash trees that are down. They have additional homes and food, but their numbers are still falling. Next slide, please. So these are the major threats to bird populations. Cats, believe it or not, 2.4 billion birds are killed by feral cats and outdoor cats per year. Window collisions are a big problem. Also, you had mentioned lighting as well. That's also a huge issue. Loss of habitat. 10 million acres have been developed between 82 and 97. And there are 40 million acres of lawn across our country. Pesticides, 1 billion pounds applied in the US. Climate change is affecting how birds are interacting with migration and food sources as they come both north and south. Invasive species, really pushing out those native plantings that they really need for food and shelter. And then finally, plastics. We have 49,000 million metric tons in our environment worldwide. 400 years to degrade, and 91% of plastics are not recycled. Plastics are in everything. Those microplastics are in our food, our water. They're affecting people, animals, birds, and so on. Next slide. How do we address these issues? These are some of the actions that we can take to help birds. We can address our outdoor and feral cats. We can make windows safer day and night. Reduce lawn, plant natives, and create healthier habitats. Avoid pesticides. Drink shade-grown coffee. That's a really interesting concept here. You know, as the birds migrate down south, They're looking for habitat. A lot of that habitat is being removed for planting of coffee trees and so on. So they're finding that if they grow shade-grown coffee actually underneath within the tree canopy, it's able to maintain habitat. Anyway, it's a great story. And then also reducing plastics. And then, of course, watching birds and enjoying them and participating in community and citizen science programs. Next slide. So I took a look at your strategic plan, and I was really delighted to see that we really fit in with the work that we're doing. This is the one that really jumped out at me. The one growing a healthier community, supported by thoughtful neighborhood spaces that is socially and environmentally sustainable, improving quality of life, protecting ecosystems, and conserving natural resources. And then these are some of the strategies that were listed as well. Next slide. So this is, I always say this is really what we're about. We're about engagement, education, encouragement, and support. And I highlighted some of the things that I use as examples of what we do, and the ones in green really fit underneath your strategic plan, in my opinion. So some of those are educating about invasive plants and running workshops for their removal. Here in Doylestown Township, I'm actually the Birdtown leader here. I'm also on the Environmental Advisory Council. And we engage with our local high school. We have the students come out. We show them what the invasive plants look like and then how to remove them. And then we put them to work for 2 hours removing those plants. Also reducing pesticides use. This is another example that fits under your strategic plan of work that we encourage our Birdtown leaders to do. Also planting trees and shrubs to create green corridors and reduce runoff and build up riparian buffer zones. Also educating about stormwater management with rain barrel workshops and native tree giveaways. The other ones that are in black are other examples, but there are actually hundreds of examples and ideas that Birdtown leaders can do in their communities that make sense. Next slide, please. So what we provide for your municipality is a statewide structured program with congruous goals. We have concrete resources and achievable actions. We have a framework for community networking with other bird towns and conservation partners, including avenues of communication events, volunteer opportunities, citizen science projects, and more. We also give training and workshops for our Birdtown leaders, and working together, we have more opportunity and success in obtaining funding. Next slide, please. So I want to give you some examples of our bird towns in action. I give just two because I know you're all busy. We have Abington Township I'm highlighting. This is an older bird town that's been in place since 2015. And the other example is a newer bird town. They've only been in place since April of 2023, Whitehall Township. Okay, so Abington Bird Town, these are some examples that they've been doing, habitat restoration, removing invasive plants like I've mentioned before, planting trees. And recently they've been working on a library area that actually they received a 500 mini grant from our Birdtown program. We were given $10,000 from a local bank. We took that money and gave out 11 $500 mini grants to our different bird towns that they had to apply for. So this is one of the examples of our bird towns that put it to work. Next slide. These are also some examples of what they did: native plant sales, bird walks, obviously, and then partnering with the Abington Shade Tree Commission. I know that you have a Shade Tree Commission, so we really encourage collaboration and partnership. They also do a lot of work in partnership with their local Audubon chapter, which is the Wyncote Audubon Society, and then also work with their watershed association as well, working again on that green stormwater infrastructure, riparian buffer zones, rain gardens, and so on. Next. Then we have Whitehall Township. This is again some new examples. Again, this is a brand new bird town that just started up in April. They've been doing some educational programming, offered some summer programming for students, have been doing some rehabilitation of a bird watching area, removing all the invasives and the planted plant natives in the spring. They're also doing community education through newsletters and so on. So this gives you an example of two different bird towns in action. We have 48 different examples and they're all doing amazing work. Next. These are our six, our 6 strategy areas. We really encourage our bird towns to really look across the community and how they can engage with different parts of the community, including doing municipal actions, working directly with the municipality, looking at municipal properties and so on to do actions. Also working with schools, school districts, and students and how they can engage with them there. Also community engagement, habitat enhancement, collaborations, and advocacy. So we encourage them to do actions in all those different strategy areas. Next. We also have a tiered program, a certification level. So all new bird towns come in at the green level, and we work with them for the whole first year to really help them move up to the next level of bronze, silver, or gold. So next slide, I can explain this a little bit more with the next slide. So our bird towns in the communities vary by financial and human capital. So we understand that some are able to do more than others based on that. The tiered structure allows communities to start small and work their way up to superstar. Some go straight to superstar, just depends on, again, on the capacity of the community. Our new Birdtown programs begin with green level certification with minimal requirements. So initially, we just want to understand what you've already accomplished, what you're working on, and what your plans are moving forward. And then, of course, the bronze, silver, and gold levels have increasing expectations. And finally, Birdtowns work at their own pace without time restrictions. Next. So the municipal application process is first setting a meeting to review the process and go through the Birdtown Municipal Application Toolkit. Then form a Birdtown committee. We found it's very helpful to have more than one person running this because if someone were to move away, the program could unfold. So we really encourage at least 3 people to be part of that committee. Also pass a municipal resolution just supporting a Birdtown and what they're about, and then completing the application and then submitting it, and it will be reviewed by our outreach committee. Okay, next slide. This is our welcome packet. We provide so many things. We have provided 2 of these signs here. One of these are behind me. This is a street sign. It's 25 by 18, so you get 2 free of those. You get 2 window clings. You get access to our 2 newsletters, one for Birdtown leaders called Birdtown Flyer, as well as a quarterly newsletter, Bird Beat, invitation to our workshops, and access to all the resources we have on the back page, and contact lists, and so on and so forth. I can go into more detail as we move along. Next slide. So thank you so much for your time tonight. I really appreciate taking the time to listen to my presentation and consider Birdtown for your municipality. And that's my presentation. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you so much. Hi, Heidi. Good to see you finally. Thank you so much for that. That was a really great overview. Let me open it up to other council members who might have some questions. I will leave this in the good hands of Jared Woolston, our sustainability manager, to work with us to think through how we might reach out, and ultimately, it sounds like we've done this before. If we get verification of the community's interests, we have a great volunteer community here, and I think that would probably be a prerequisite for us to know we were on the right track. But I think I can speak pretty clearly that some of our other actions we have committed to are bird friendly. And I can tell you, I have this dilapidated back porch where I have a hole that's about 3 inches by about 6 inches that I thought about getting repaired. But every spring, about the end of March, there is a competition for this unbelievable bird nest that is my dilapidated porch, and it brings me great joy to watch the activity that surrounds this home. It has been home to probably 24 birds.
Wow.
Eventually I'm going to have to get this repaired, but I do. It brings me such joy to see the birds in my small backyard, and I suspect there's a lot of people here in Carlisle who feel the same way and like to, do some smart things that aren't too much of a lift to do, to increase and try to bring back some of our bird populations. So we will get back with Jeff. We'll get back with you, and really and if we have any follow-up questions, we'll reach out to you. But really appreciate that, Heidi.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you for your story too. Wish you guys all a good night, and I look forward to being in touch. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Thank you.
I think Jared just wrote your place down, Joel, for code inspection. I've said too much. Speaking of Jared, zoning reform update.
I just have a quick presentation. I think it's only about 3 slides. So very, very sad. We've gone off of our 5 item goals, and now we're on to something else. But this has been, I guess, percolating for some time. I guess council's been briefed on this prior to my arrival a couple of years ago, and this deserves some attention. So group homes treatment centers, the definition of family dwelling. All these things were reviewed by a couple of different law firms, including our own borough solicitor. And I provided counsel with just a short summary of all the recommended changes to the zoning ordinance that the most recent law firm put together. And these definitions were done in consultation with staff, Borough Manager Armstrong, myself. I don't know if former staff looked at this, but most recently it was that group and these attorneys and the borough solicitor that sort of reviewed these different definitions. So what you have in your sort of paper packet is a more detailed version of the slide that's up here. And what I tried to do for the benefit of council is provide you with a snapshot comparison of what's already in the zoning ordinance for definitions, standards, and land use activity allowances in specific zoning districts, and then right next to that, what will have changed. So just going through this quickly, the definition of dwelling was called out as potentially needing some updating. Just as a snapshot, our dwelling definition currently calls out a building type, and we have several different, dwelling types in the zoning ordinance, but as a function of, density regulation, a dwelling unit per acre is what we use to sort of limit, housing density within an individual zoning district. But the current definition refers to a building type, so that was sort of unclear. What we've gone and done is just sort of clarify this definition to be used as sort of a measure, a single unit, and updated it for the ADA and FHA federal standards. The Americans with Disabilities Act, the Fair Housing Act, these are federal laws that sort of preempt state and local laws, regulations that would sort of, be lesser or in sort of violation of those federal laws. So again, that definition was updated to clarify the dwelling unit as a unit of measure and updated for ADA and FHA. The same is true for family, except in this case, ADA and FHA updates from the attorney or also coupled with individual occupants for a family type, unrelated people that would be included in family. And again, the language is sort of updated for current practice, current standards, to avoid any regulations that could be challenged. Group home as well. This definition needed to be updated to comply with current standards and law. Housekeeping unit. The former, or I guess the current group home definition refers to household unit. This is somewhat unclear because household unit is not defined. So we've changed this reference to housekeeping unit, which is consistent with what we're already sort of regulating in the International Property Maintenance Code as locally adopted. And it sort of refers generally, and you'll see it in your packet, to the composition of an actual dwelling and sort of what physically is included in that. A treatment center, again, this definition needed to be updated and clarified. There's some additional standards that go along with it. And then in terms of zoning district changes, the R1 zoning district, this is our low density zoning district. This was just clarified to indicate that group homes are permitted by right. They have been permitted by right, so this is just a clarifying standard that's proposed. C3 and C4, these are still sort of items that staff probably need to evaluate, and it would be helpful if council sort of considered what's proposed and sort of give us some guidance in terms of the attorney's take on the C3 and C4. These are commercial zoning districts, and I think the typical practice for zoning in Pennsylvania and other places across the United States is to have zoning districts that are clearly commercial or clearly residential or industrial. The practice that I think we're sort of wading into with the zoning reform and some things that staff are sort of bringing forth as recommendations is to allow a mixture of uses whenever possible. In C3 and C4, the recommendation, again, to follow the typical practice of commercial zoning districts or for commercial uses, is to delete group homes as a special exception. On the planning side, staff would also sort of provide some guidance that there's room to consider the existing residential uses that are permitted within C3 and C4. For example, C3, again, there's a note if you forget my jabbering on here, but in your packet you'll see C3 allows a couple of different residential dwelling types. Although it's a commercial district as defined, it still has some residential uses that are allowed. And then C4 allows everything that's allowed in the R4 zoning district, which is single family, two family, townhouses, garden apartments. Again, from the attorney's standpoint, these are commercial districts, so it made sense to delete certain references to group homes. From the planning side, there might be some room to consider, including group homes in these districts, although the recommendation that's before you is to delete them. And C4, again, a commercial district, neighborhood commercial, the recommendation is to add treatment center by right. And then in I1 and I2, sort of by default, everything that's allowed in I2, how does this go? Everything that's allowed in I2 is also allowed in I1. So there's some goofy reference there. But in the industrial zoning districts, the recommendation is to delete treatment center from those places. And then UM, which is our urban mixed use zoning district, the recommendation is to permit treatment center in that district. So that's kind of a snapshot of what's before you. Probably a lot to process in a workshop. And again, the papers that staff have provided in bold lettering, that's the proposed language, and just the straight type with no bold, that's the existing language. And then anything that's in italics, that's just an editorial from staff. So as you wade into this, I guess that's your guidance.
So Jerry, just for clarification, with respect to group homes, they would be a permitted use in all residential districts, correct?
Yeah, so that doesn't change. So the zoning ordinance already accommodates group homes. R1 was the only residential district that was flagged for clarification. But again, it sort of reads as though group homes in permitted dwellings are allowed. So there's just a slight modification in that text for clarity.
Any questions?
Just to clarify, so treatment centers would be permitted by right in the urban mixed use district. Are there what other zoning districts are they allowed in, or would they be allowed in through this?
Treatment centers also were put in C4, and they were deleted in the industrial zoning districts.
So, or is a treatment center not allowed in a residential district under the current zoning ordinance?
Any reference would have been deleted. I'm trying to remember if there was. Group homes, I think, were modified, but I don't believe treatment center was in any residential district. I think it was just in industrial.
Thanks for clarifying.
Anything else? Go ahead, Joel.
Just so that I'm clear. The question regarding commercial zoned areas, is your recommendation, as you laid out, based on more of a compliance recommendation, or to be consistent with sort of our economic development? Obviously, we do allow some residential in some of our commercial districts. I just want to make sure whatever plan we go with would be compliant with all the federal guidelines, and if we don't, is it an all or nothing approach when it comes to how we do it in commercial areas? If you could clarify that for me, if that makes sense.
So I guess if council was to adopt what's before you, the attorneys would be satisfied. Okay, so that's number one. But from the planning side, staff has already advised council months ago to allow residential and commercial whenever it makes sense, whenever it's possible. A blend of uses gives more market opportunity for commercial or residential. Single-use districts have been found many times to limit market opportunities in a way that just can't keep pace with market change. Again, the attorneys would be totally satisfied with this as it's been drafted, but I wanted council to be aware of options.
Great, thank you for that.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, thank you, Jared. Next is discussion on the American Rescue Plan funds. So I'll lead that one, and then anybody from staff who's involved in the discussion can surely chime in. So we were tasked with coming up with a rough sketch of a plan to specifically program our ARPA funds, the balance of our ARPA funds, I should say. What we determined we would do and suggest to council is to, one, and Deputy Mayor was specifically on our minds as we were thinking about ensuring that whatever we do is consistent with all of our guiding documents, number one. So the comprehensive plan, to the extent that, I know there are pieces of that we like a lot. There are, of course, things that I think we'll wind up amending down the line. The strategic plan that we just passed, our climate action plan, and our truth and reconciliation recommendations specifically were discussed during that meeting. What we have proposed is a process through which, although we got examples from a couple of other communities, it was a very top-down process that we saw from those communities. Basically, the council identified programs that were going to be funded and then put those out for public discussion after having identified everything. And I think they probably just wound up approving what they had already identified. I think it's consistent with most of our practice. I think an example of that was Councilor Stubbe sort of suggested on the Bedford and East Street, is to allow that to bake a little bit in the public domain. So what we've done is identified a number of categories, and then we'd like to have, whether it's at your individual meetings with the borough manager, and I'd be happy to sit in on as many of those as I can, or separate meetings if that's more convenient. If there's too much, I know those agendas get pretty busy, and then to have individual discussions about some of the finer aspects of this. We propose a number of categories. transportation, infrastructure, economic development, racial equity, climate action, housing, and then carve out a separate section for participatory budgeting that we had brought up. I think Councilor Stubbe brought up during our last goal planning, and we haven't incorporated it into our processes yet. I thought this might be a nice opportunity to sort of pilot that idea. So, and these categories you'll see noted in the memo that you have aren't intended to be silos. There are going to be programs, initiatives that and proposals from the outside that will certainly overlap a number of these categories. You can see easy overlaps between racial equity issues, and just about everything, really, from economic development to housing, transportation, and infrastructure. So as we think about these, don't think of them as, this one's going to fit neatly within one category and not others. We're going to see some overlap there. As a general concept, just wanted to get some feedback from council, and then we can dig into the finer details in the coming weeks and a couple months. We would like to have this all in place before we enter into budget season. Before staff enters into the real busy part of budget season. So by the end of the summer, and then get this rolling. Any thoughts? Anyone? It's been a long meeting. Go ahead.
Just so everyone's clear, I think I have this right, is the nearest deadline that the first tranche expires is 4 years from now?
So we don't, we're okay with that deadline. The borough has elected revenue replacement. So every year for the last 2 years, Borough Council has basically recognized $3 million. So the borough will recognize the remainder of those funds by the end of 2024. We've set that money aside and committed it for this process.
So we've given ourselves, by how we already committed the funds, it gives us basically whatever timeline.
They're general funds now.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, at the end of 2024, they'll be completely general funds that we can use whenever we want for whatever purpose we want.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah. Sure. Any other questions, thoughts?
I'll just say what I said to you a little bit when we chatted for a minute about it. I appreciate how you brought up the categories, and definitely thinking of how a lot of these things blend and how we can hit the most with spending these dollars. The other thing that I just, I've been thinking about these funds for a long time and just sort of percolating, and so that thinking about ways that we can partner with other groups that maybe have already thought of, some things that can benefit Carlisle, things that we don't have in our budget to really start something that we've, that we've wanted to get, implemented. So I'm really just, instead of just like a pet project, which I think that's what a lot of people think, oh, you're gonna, but I think that we can think about how, what we need, what these concepts are that we've talked about in our strategic plan, and definitely other people think about these things too. So I think instead of it just being only us percolating it is about all of Carlisle. So we're just doing the first pass on it and coming up with some ideas. But also, if you know of other things that are in the works in other places, I think lending support to something that also is somewhere else that's not quite, ready to go, but we could help support with this. I think those are the types of things that are just in my mind.
Mm-hmm. Anything else? Yeah.
As I think through this, are these funds able to be used? I think the answer is no, as matching funds for other federal funds.
They're because of what Richard just described. They're general funds. When I say we can use it for whatever, as long as it's legal for a borough to use it, we can use it.
I'm only going to ask for one more clarification. After the third time, I will really understand. Oh, you've eloquently answered my question twice. Okay, so it's basically been detached.
These are
federal
unrestrained.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Richard, for clarification purposes too, we had the ability to draw those funds down because we were under a certain the
There was a $10
$10 million.
million threshold. Yeah.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we were able to take such action.
Okay. Yeah. I thought it might. Anything else? Okay. Then we'll move on to Public Works.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have 3 items this evening for council's consideration. First, I move that Borough Council authorize the mayor to sign the grant agreement and other supporting documents for the Transportation Infrastructure Investment Funding Grant received from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, acting through the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation, in the amount of $1,200,000 for the Carlisle Connectivity Project and North Hanover Street component. And then in addition to that, I move that Borough Council adopt a resolution which is attached for review, giving the mayor and borough manager signatory authority for all documents needed associated with this grant program.
Councilor Stubbe makes a motion to authorize me to sign the grant agreement and other supporting documents on the TIF funding, along with the resolution that goes along with that. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hicks. Any discussion? I'm gonna cause some discussion on this, or at least my comments on this. One, this 1.2 million is really part of a package of a couple of grants that closed that $2.9 million funding gap that we had on Project One, the connectivity plan. And so thanks to Governor Shapiro and his administration for his last 1.2 million. Also thanks to Senator Rothman and especially the funds that we got through HAT's administration of our federal highway aid funds, to Representative Gleim for their support on this. Thank you to everybody on staff, Jeff, Mark, Susan, for pulling that all together, because it was a real team effort that made that all happen. It felt like a miracle when I describe it to other folks who know municipal government and the way things work. They're shocked that we pulled it off. So kudos to everybody. We should be very proud of that effort here. It's going to make a big difference, and it's going to allow us to build out that redevelopment site. Any other discussion? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Better not be one. Motion passes.
Next, I move that Borough Council retroactively authorize the mayor and borough manager to sign the COVID-19 American Rescue Plan Act H2OPA agreement with the Commonwealth Financing Authority for the $520,000 grant received by the borough for its sanitary sewer system rehabilitation project.
Councilor Stubbe gets to make motions on all the grant funds tonight. So makes a motion to authorize and approve the H2OPA agreement with the Commonwealth Financing Authority. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hicks. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion passes.
And finally, I move that Borough Council retroactively authorize the borough manager to sign the grant reimbursement agreement amendment for the Regional Transportation Plan Implementation Grant received from the United States Department of Transportation, Federal Highway Administration, increasing the total grant amount from $1 million to $2,700,000 for the Carlisle Connectivity Project North Hanover Street component.
And there's the rest of that money. Councilor Stubbe makes a motion to authorize the borough manager to sign the relevant grant reimbursement agreement retroactively. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hicks. Is there any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. And the motion passes.
And that concludes the Public Works Committee report this evening.
Okay. Under Public Safety, I move the council approve a special event request by the Downtown Carlisle Association to utilize 4 parking meters at the corner of South Hanover and West Church Avenue, 2 parking meters at 152 North Hanover Street, and lift the sidewalk ordinance for purposes of holding the ever so popular annual Ice Art Fest and carriage ride scheduled for February 2nd through February 4th, 2024. And approval is subject to receipt of a valid certificate of liability insurance form naming the borough of Carlisle as an additional insured. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Roos. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion passes. Next, I move the council approve a special events application and associated West Chapel Avenue parking lot application for the 4th annual Earth Day celebration to be held on Saturday, April 27th, 2024 from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Roos. Is there any discussion? And I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion passes. That concludes my report. There's no public to comment in the audience. Is there anybody by Zoom with a hand up? There's no one stuck with us. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.